Hello, everybody, and welcome to Table Talk. My name is Joni Rampolla, one of the registered licensed dietitians with Giant and Martin's. And this month in Table Talk, we are learning all about lean proteins. And today I am so excited to introduce Amy, who is a beef farmer. Talk about the whole beef products. Amy, you want to take a minute and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Amy Hess, and I own and operate Bow Creek Farm with my husband Rob in Hershey, Pennsylvania. We have about 350 acres that we farm all together. About 200 of that is land that we just grow hay on, and then the other 150 is land that we have cattle on that we raise. We have probably about 55 cows right now. Um,
Wow.
In addition to that, we still have some of their calves from last year. We'll be feeding them out or using some of those animals as breeding stock. We also have a few bulls on the farm, a few horses, just for fun. We don't really use them for moving cattle around or anything like that. But that's primarily our farm.
So interesting. Thank you for that introduction. And I want to know a little bit more about that. So, can you tell us how you got into becoming a beef farmer?
Yeah, so when I started dating my husband, Rob, I was actually living in New York City with no plans to ever leave the city. We started dating. We both went to the same high school locally. I'm from the Hershey area. And we started dating and we got married, and I kind of had to become a farmer. Um, Although I will say that neither of us grew up farming, we're both first generation farmers. His family had owned some land that they had rented out to other farmers. He grew up working since he was probably about 12 with another local farmer who taught him everything he knows about growing hay. And when we got married, we decided to take the farm over and start farming. And at the time, it was really just a part time thing. We both worked in other industries. My husband was a builder and developer with his father. I was an investment advisor. We really didn't have any plans to become full-time farmers. But in 2008, they had finished their last development, and that was kind of a downturn in the economy as far as home building. And they decided they were just done. And from that point on, we just devoted more time to farming. He also does have a real estate license, and we also have rental properties. So we're not really depending on farming as our only income, but it's a good chunk of it, and it definitely takes up the majority of our time.
Such a good, interesting story. Got a lot of comments about that. Like, wow, Hershey's really different.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
your background. So,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and I grew up here, so it's not really that different to me, but I really didn't have any intentions of coming back, but I'm
so.
glad
What
I
is,
did.
yeah. So, what is the life cycle of a cow like?
Yeah, so our farm, we're considered a cow-calf farm. That's where there are mother cows, and every year they have one young, one calf, usually one. Sometimes they can have twins, um, but that's not really, that doesn't happen often. So they'll have a calf every year, and that's usually for us. We breed in this we breed so that the calves are all born in the spring. Some farms will do spring and fall, but we are only spring. So they'll have a calf every spring. That calf will be born. It's about 60 to 100 pounds, and it'll feed from its mother's milk, and it'll start to graze, and it'll spend the first 6 to 10 months of its life with its mother out in the pasture. Mother cows are always in the pasture. Um, and I should probably stop and like define some terms that I always find that some people don't really like even know the definition of a cow. Everyone thinks that a cow is just any kind of bovine animal, but a cow is really a female that has given birth to a calf. When she has a calf, those calves are either heifers, they're females, or they're bulls, which is a male. And if you hear me say steer, that would be a bull that's been castrated. So just to kind of clear that up, because I know I throw around a lot of terms that some people might not know. And honestly, like if you have a question, please stop and ask me.
Yes.
So
So, I do have a customer
sure.
question,
Yeah.
different topic before you started. So, the fields that you grow hay, Do you only grow hay, or is that to grow other crops later?
Yeah, so those fields are only for growing hay. We recently were able to fence in probably about an additional 40 acres of hay so that we can graze those fields if we want to, or we can remove the hay from it. Usually when we're able to take hay from a field 2 to 3 times a year. So we'll probably remove like the first and second cutting of hay from those fields, and then we can move the cattle in later to graze it. Just gives us more options and to diversify and kind of the past 2 years we've had some issues with drought, and it would have been nice to have some extra fields to move those cattle into. So next year we're in a lot better position with those additional acres that are fenced in.
Nice. Can you talk a little bit about the care of the animals?
Sure. Yeah, and I guess I didn't really finish about the life cycle either. I should
Yeah.
probably
Okay. Yep.
that.
Go ahead.
So the calves are with their mothers in the fields for the first 6 to 10 months of their life. At about 6 to 10 months, we do wean them. We bring them back to the farm, and we do what's called fence line weaning. We'll put the mothers on one pasture and the calves on the other side of the pasture, just along a fence row, so they can still see their moms and touch noses and things like that. At weaning, really the beef industry is really complex and fragmented. Most animals will be sold 2 to 3 times and change hands each stage of their life or each stage of their development. And really they're sold um, because their nutritional needs change. What one farm in the West, they're really great at raising cows and calves and breeding animals, but they don't have a ton of grass to maybe background an animal. So after weaning, that animal would go to a backgrounder where they'll continue to graze and be fed some supplemental feed till they're about 1 year of age. At that time, then they might be sold again to a feed yard where again their nutritional needs change and their diet changes. They'll continue to have to eat some kind of grass and roughage, but at that point, some higher energy grains will be added to their diet, just so that they can grow muscle more efficiently and put on more weight faster. And then at that point, yeah, so after the feed yard, they're going to spend the last 4 to 6 months of their life at the feed yard. Everyone thinks that sometimes that grain-fed cattle spend their entire lives eating grain, and that really just isn't true. As I mentioned, cattle spend the majority of their life grazing. It's usually just the last 4 to 6 months where they're in the feed yard, and feed yards do a lot to make sure that the animals are kept content and they have all that they need. They're given a balanced ration. They're given plenty of room to display like their natural behaviors where they can socialize and lay down. They run around, they play. And then really that balanced ration, they just can freely graze at that from bunks. Sometimes you'll see pictures of cattle in feed yards where they're all crammed together. And usually those pictures are either an area where they're being moved like through a chute system or being transported somewhere. But if you would look at their pen and you would ask them to pan out, you'll see large areas of the pen that are empty. Cattle just naturally like to be together and stay in groups. Um, I always like to do a post on our farm every year where during the summer I'll go out to the pasture and it'll be a hot day. It'll be sunny, lots of flies, and I'll go out there and all the cattle will just be practically laying on top of each other in one area. And then I take a picture of that, and then I step back and I pan out and I show the entire like 40-acre field is empty. So again, it's just what cattle like to do. And in feed yards, they are given plenty of room to move around. After the feed yard, they are then again probably sold, and then they'll go to a packing plant where they'll be processed. All packing plants in the United States have to be USDA inspected or the state equivalent. So there are USDA inspectors there looking at those animals, watching them come off the trailers. They're looking at the entire process from the time they come off the trailers to they're killed, and even through the meat cutting process. So there's always someone there watching to make sure that they're being handled safely and that there's good animal welfare being used. And then after the packing plant, that's when it's dispersed, the meat is dispersed to different food service um, and retail institutions.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that good detailed explanation. I have a couple customer questions about hay. So somebody's asking, are there different types like clover alfalfa, and what type do you use?
Yeah, so on our farm, we grow what's called orchard grass. It's what really naturally comes up here. You can plant all different types of hay. We've just found over the years, letting what grows naturally is best. Every once in a while, you have to reseed a field. Um, there are, like I said, so many different types of hay. There is clover that grows in it. Those are legumes, and we like to have some legumes in the hay. It adds more like nutrition and protein to the hay diet. And pasture is great and hay is great, but it actually isn't all of the cattle's nutritional needs. Much of the ground and soil in our area in Pennsylvania is depleted of some minerals. Not depleted, it's just low in some minerals like selenium, copper, magnesium especially. So we do have to supplement cattle, even the cattle that are on grass, they get it supplemented with a mineral and a salt.
So interesting. So customers are asking a lot of questions about social. So want to know, like, do you name your cows? Have you ever been attached to a cow? Those
We
kind of
do, we
questions.
do name, we often name cows. Cattle are really cool animals. They all have slightly different personalities, maybe in the way they were raised or their breeding. Some of them, about half on our farm, have an actual name. The cows are on our farm for a very long time. Most cattlemen and ranchers on cow-calf farms keep them about 8 to 10 years. We have kept some of our cows longer than that. One of our oldest cows was 18.
Wow. Do you show them at the farm show?
We don't. We used to do a little showing, but not anymore. It's a lot of work.
Yes, it is. So most cattle farms are kind of large scale, corporate owned is what most people think. Can you address that comment?
Yeah, it's not really true. Over 90% of ranches and cow-calf farms are family-owned and operated. Matter of fact, I said we have about 55 cows right now. I think the U.S. average is only 40 to 45 head per farm. So that's thousands and thousands of farms raising all of the beef that goes into your grocery store on small farms, farms just like mine. So what we're doing really isn't any different than most farms. As I said, it's just a little different. A lot of farms will specialize in one stage of the animal's life, where it's cow-calf, or whether it's after they're weaned and they're backgrounded, or whether it's going to a feedlot. We happen to just do all of that on our farm.
You're getting a lot of really positive feedback that you're explaining things so well, even from people that grew up on a farm. So thanks for all this great
Yeah,
information.
sure.
I
I wish
always
I could
love
have you all here to my farm for a visit.
that would be awesome. Yeah, so I feel like the customer base loves to learn a little bit about sustainability. So that means something different to different people. If I were
It
to ask you, what does sustainability mean on a cattle farm?
Yeah, so it does mean a lot of different things to different people. It's not really a well-defined term. Really for us, and I'll go back to why we even have cattle. Our land here in Hershey, Pennsylvania, you might have heard of like places like Lancaster County in Pennsylvania that have really great soil. We live just north of the Swatara Creek, and that area, the soil really changes and becomes really shaly. We have lots of hills. So our land where we're growing hay and where we have pastures really isn't good for growing other crops. We could grow corn and soybeans. We just would not get the great yields that other areas around us do. So what's more sustainable than growing what grows? And that's grass. And to harvest our grass, we have cattle. The cattle are ruminants, and that's a really cool thing. Ruminants are very different, have different digestion than humans and different metabolism. Some people think that ruminants have four stomachs. They don't. They have one stomach, but with four different chambers. And in that stomach, they have trillions of microbes that can digest cellulose and plant material that humans can't. So that grass we have growing in our fields that we really can't grow anything else, they can eat that grass and consume it and digest it. And then they can turn that into a high quality protein that humans can digest. And really, I think like over 80% of the land in the United States where cattle are grazing is not land that's suitable for other crops. So when you want to talk about sustainability, cattle are really doing a lot for our food system in the United States. They're adding a lot more land that's available to grow food on if we didn't have them. And I think like sometimes with sustainability, efficiency is a bad word. But really, cattlemen all across the country are working really hard to feed cattle and raise them as efficiently as possible so that we're using the least amount of resources possible, the least amount of land, the least amount of water, the least amount of feed. Um, and we do that by the way we manage cattle and the way we've genetically selected them through the decades. Cattle that are raised in the United States are really different from, excuse me, cattle in other countries. You're going to find breeds like Black Angus and Red Angus, Simmental, Hereford, that those breeds have been genetically selected for different traits over the last like few decades, probably more than that. But all of that has made them very efficient animals. They have higher meat yields. They mature faster so that they can be on the earth less time than some other breeds of cattle. There's so many different things that have been done. Just to give you an idea, I like to throw out numbers. I know not everybody likes numbers, but I think they can kind of give you some perspective of how the U.S. is different from other countries. The United States produces 18% of the world's beef, but with only 6% of its cattle. So that's pretty amazing. I think it takes like 2.66 animals in some other countries to equal the same amount of yield, the same amount of beef we get from American cattle. We produce the same amount of beef that we did in 1977, but with 33% fewer animals. So, I mean, again, we did that through genetic selection. It's from the nutrition that the animals receive and our management practices. So, you often hear a lot of statistics about like how global beef is affecting the world, but in the United States, it's very different. I think all of agriculture is like 11% of greenhouse gas emissions. All of cattle, I think including dairy cattle, is 3.7%, and beef cattle are 2% of greenhouse gas emissions.
So
So it's a
interesting.
good story. And we're still
It's
working to make it better, but
excellent. So you have a lot of comments in chat of people wanting to come do a giant field trip over there. So they're asking, one, do you do tours? And two, do you sell only to retail outlets or do you also sell to individual customers?
we do. We wholesale and retail here at the farm. And we do tours often. But they're usually like within cattle industry groups, but we do all sorts of tours.
And then there's some comments in the chat about like the methane gas.
Yeah.
Can
Yes.
you
So, sure. So, because cattle are consuming grass and those microbes in their gut are digesting it, it's actually the microbes that are digesting the grass that's causing those microbes give off methane, and cows burp it out. They don't fart it out like you might hear in some places. It's mostly burped out. There is some in their manure as well. But so there are trade-offs with everything, right? Like there's going to be greenhouse gas emissions. There's going to be some methane with cattle, but really that methane is broken down in the atmosphere within 10 years. And it's sort of like I think they call it like the biogenic cycle where cattle eat grass and they burp methane, and that methane gets turned into carbon, and the carbon gets turned back into the soil. So cattle, when they're grazing, they also can sequester carbon in the soil. So that's another benefit to cattle grazing, is keeping that carbon in the soil. And then some other benefits for having cattle around that you might not have heard about is for control of wildfires. Cattle grazing and eating excess vegetation in different areas, especially out west, are really beneficial to kind of control the spread of wildfires and keep them from not being as bad as they are. And then also, when you go out on our pastures, practically any day, you're going to find all different sorts of types of like wildlife. You'll find deer, you'll find rabbits, you'll find insects, spiders, birds. Cattle can really cohabitate with other animals, and so those grazing pastures are really important for wildlife.
Excellent. So as a dietitian, I always want to ask the nutrition questions. I know you mentioned nutrition about the soil or here and there, but can you just talk broadly about how the cattle's fed?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned on our farm, we do feed some animals for beef, and it's pretty similar to what would happen on a large scale feedlot, like from one out west. We bring them to an area that's a little more confined. It does also have a roof. In the Northeast, there's a lot of moisture, and moisture can be really hard on cattle, really hard to keep them healthy and disease free. We do a lot to keep them disease free, and I probably should mention that. Every day we're going out and we're checking the cattle, and we're making sure they have clean water, fresh food, and just looking them over and making sure they all look healthy. Cattle can kind of let you know when they're not feeling well. If we see an animal that's laying down but not chewing its cud, that would be a sign. Sometimes their ears are drooped. They could be limping. The pastures, everybody wants to think that like pastures are this great place for cattle, and they are. We breed animals so that they are healthy enough and strong enough to withstand the environment. But pastures also there could be a lot of stressors. You have sun, you have rain, you have flies in the summer. I hate flies. You have mud and ice. If you ever go out in the winter to a pasture that was muddy and then it froze, you're going to see cattle do not like walking across that ground. So when we decide to feed an animal, we bring it into an area where we can better control their environment. The area has really good footing. We keep it clean. Like I said, we keep it under roof because we feel that keeping moisture off of them only helps to keep them healthier. Cattle can be really susceptible to respiratory diseases. So the roof hurts and helps. You always want to make sure there's good airflow because that's very important for cattle. But again, I just think keeping the water off them does a lot to keep them healthy. In addition, all of our cattle receive vaccines. We feel that it's really important. We vaccinate against different clostridial diseases, respiratory diseases, and we do feel that that keeps them much healthier, that I think we would have to treat with more antibiotics if we didn't do that. In caring for our animals, I mean, there's so many different management practices that are possible. We're always trying to treat them and make sure that they have as the least amount of stress possible. That's using good handling methods, having a relationship with our veterinarian. She knows our business, she knows our farm. We can call her up any day, and if we're having a problem, she might not even necessarily need to come for a visit. She knows that we have the capability of following through with treatments. We're also what's called BQA certified. That's Beef Quality Assurance. That's a national program that I think over 80% of ranchers across the country are BQA certified. And it's a best management practices for ranchers and farmers to follow so that we're raising safe, wholesome beef Again, it covers everything from, like I said, proper handling methods to vaccinations, uh, even transportation. So there's a lot of information that we like to follow from BQA.
Excellent. I think that answer actually answered some of the other questions I have. So we have just 5 minutes left. So I want to get through these
Sure.
questions. If you could just
Oh,
rapid
it's going
fire
fast.
them. How many employees do you have, and do you struggle getting employees?
We have 0 employees. I would love to have employees, but uh, really it's difficult with small farms. Everybody wants to support small farms, and we totally appreciate that. But the volume that is actually being sold, it's difficult to have the sales to be able to support an employee. It makes it tough. It's primarily my husband and I. I will say that my daughter, we have 2 children, a son who's
Right.
23 and lives
I'm,
off.
I'm going to rapid fire.
Oh,
Go to the next
yeah,
one.
go ahead.
Why do cattle chew cud?
So they are ruminants, and so when they eat the grass, it goes into their rumen, and so they eat a bunch of grass in the morning. Usually by about 10 a.m., they're finished eating grass, and they will lay down and they sort of regurgitate some of that grass to chew it further. And then those microbes in their gut will continue to break it down.
Perfect. Do you ever get a vacation? And if yes, who watches the cattle?
Yeah, that's a good question. We went about 7 years without a vacation, but we have a neighbor nearby who does he helps us out. Like if we're moving a large amount of cattle, he'll come over and help us, or if we have a problem. So we totally trust him with our cows, and so he will every once in a while he'll watch our cows long enough for us to go away.
Awesome. Do you brand your cattle?
We do brand our cattle. It's not necessary, but we also produce registered animals that we're selling to other farms and ranches so they can improve their genetics. And we just think it's a kind of a neat thing to do to brand. We like a dry ice product to brand them. And I can't say that it doesn't hurt them. I mean, it's kind of like a bee sting. They jump for a second. But what it does is it doesn't actually burn their skin. It changes it so that their hair grows back in white in that area.
Oh, right. Interesting. Do you have farm dogs or farm kittens?
We don't have a farm dog currently, but we do have farm cats. Yes. Yeah,
Excellent.
they
Very,
do a
very
good job.
interesting. So do you have a favorite beef recipe?
Yeah, actually, we're talking about Heart Health Month. We should talk about lean beef. Every cut in the animal is a different tenderness, flavor, and fat profile. And there are over 36 cuts of beef that are considered lean. Lean by the USDA is 10 grams or less of total fat, 4.5 grams or less of saturated fat, and less than 95 microgram, oh geez, I don't know, of cholesterol. And that's per 3 ounce serving. Um,
Milligrams. Yeah.
Milligrams, yeah, sorry. Um, so that's per 3 ounce serving. And some of my favorite lean cuts for steak, some people will be surprised, but filet mignon is considered lean. New York strip is considered lean. Top sirloin steaks for steaks. And then for roasts, top round roast and eye of round are considered lean. Anything usually that has the word loin in it or round is usually a lean cut. And I think you're going to post.
Yeah, I sent it out actually
Oh,
before
good.
this class. But
Beefitswhatsfordinner.com is a really great resource. You could put in any cut in there and it'll tell you if it's lean. It'll give you different recipes and ways of cooking it. Lean cuts are great because they are usually um, easier to cook and they are more like they're less costly to purchase. Cooking, you can roast them. It's really hard to mess up a roast. You put it in low and slow for a while and you take it out when it's tender enough. My favorite lean cut is probably the tri-tip. It's a little harder to find in grocery stores in the East Coast. But a tri-tip is tender enough you can cook it like a steak, or you can cook it low and slow. We like to cook it what's called the reverse sear method, where you do it in the oven for at about 250 till it hits about 130 degrees. And then you take it out and you sear it in either a grill or a hot pan. We love to cook that with some roasted vegetables in the winter and vegetables on the grill in the summer. It's probably our favorite. Um, yeah,
And
if I can suggest, you can buy an inexpensive meat thermometer. I always suggest doing that. I know our customers always, their biggest fear is that they're going to mess up the beef. You know, it's an expensive cut. You don't want to mess it up. So I always suggest a meat thermometer. We have one that goes in the oven or the grill, and it stays in there, and it'll tell you when your meat reaches your desired temperature.
love it. Thank you. Got so many positive comments in chat here with everybody loving this table talk. So thank you so much,
You're
Amy.
welcome. You're welcome.
And some great information. It obviously was received very well and people appreciate it.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you again for
Thanks for
joining us.
having me.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thank you. Everybody
Thank
have a
you.
great day. Bye.